Well, hi, everyone. I'm Jim Killam. We are doing another in a series of online conversations here. And this one today is going to be a little bit different. We're talking about social media use. And this is in the wake of a documentary film that a lot of people have seen, a lot of people are talking about. So we'll be discussing a little bit of that, but first I want our panelists here to introduce themselves. So we have Lara Griffin, we have Biby, we have Nathan McDonald. So all from our church, and I'm gonna let them give you a little bit more introduction. So Lara, you go first.
Sure. I'm Lara Griffin, and I work for the church. I'm the communications coordinator, right? And I just help out with the social media for the church. I also have an Etsy shop that I have been using social media for the last 5 years for marketing. I'm a mom to 3 girls and my wife to Jonathan Griffin.
Biby. I am a former employee of First Free Rockford. I still serve on the elder board there, but I am a web designer. I help a lot of companies actually integrate social media into their marketing efforts, as well as help them sell products through that. So kind of have an intimate knowledge of some of the things that were discussed in the recent movie. I'm a father of 3 boys and husband to a lovely wife, Lara, and I'm glad to be here today talking about social media.
My name's Nathan McDonald. I'm the communications director for First Free. I actually took Biby's job when he left to go out on his own in business. And I've been in marketing communication industry for a number of years, primarily as a graphic designer, but now doing graphic design and directing the communications department. So I've been using social media day in and day out for work and also in my personal life. So I'm pretty accustomed to it. And my family, I have a 10-year-old son named Griffin and my wife is Jessica. We've also helped out with music for the chapel venue service. So that's another way I've been involved with First Free.
Yeah, and I introduced myself. I'm Jim Killam. I work with Wycliffe Bible Translators as my day job, and then I do writing for First Free and other places. And I'm a husband, dad, and grandpa. And I guess I watch a lot of online videos of people crashing into things. So social media for me is just sort of a diversion, but I do realize I use it more than I realized. So this film was The Social Dilemma, and I know it's on Netflix, it's on other places online. It has its own website called, I think, thesocialdilemma.com or something like that. And it's a bunch of people being interviewed who used to work for social media companies and have gotten out, and they're almost apologizing for what they've created and unleashed on the world. And it's a little bit dark, but it's also, I think, important information that we can have about how social media works and about, exactly what it's designed to do. There were 2 quotes in the film that I wrote down to kind of start us today. And one was, if you're not paying for something, you are the product. And the second one is, the only 2 industries that call their customers users are illegal drug dealers and software.
Yeah.
So, I think we could just maybe start by, what impressions did you guys have of this film? Did it show you anything you weren't already aware of? And we'll kind of talk about all of this in light of faith and family and how we're trying to navigate some things. So, no particular order here. Just jump in if you have a thought.
I think it wasn't anything new for me anyway. A lot of times when I'm helping companies retarget with advertising on social media, you're building an avatar, you're building a kind of a persona of the audience that you're wanting to go after for marketing purposes. So it was kind of cool and a little bit scary to see them actually visualize that the way they did in the movie. You know, it feels very dark and obviously could be used for nefarious purposes. I do see a lot of legitimate good use advertising and marketing practices that happen to use the Facebook platform and Google platform, but they really took it to the extreme of how dark things can get and how nefarious they can get when you're looking at you know, misinformation, disinformation, campaigns to disrupt. It's really a scary time right now. One of the guys commented about, it was Tristan Harris commented about truth and how if we can't decide on what is true and or even agree that there is truth, that's kind of the disruption of our social fabric. And so it is a little bit of a wake-up call. It did, you know, especially with having young kids coming up in this world and trying to navigate how to allow them access to these things. It was just enlightening. It was a good reminder to be vigilant with the way that we use these tools and be ethical with the way that we use them, and try to do things in a way that's not going to exploit the probably the unintentional availability of information that's out there. But yeah, I don't know.
Lara, you're navigating this as a business owner and a mom. What's it look like for you? And as a social media user too, I'm sure, because we all are.
Yeah, I pretty much don't have my kids using social media at all. I mean, they're on the younger side from 6 to 10. So I want to wait a few years. And even then I'm still part of the experiment, as they say. So I'm trying to still figure out what how am I responding to it? And it hasn't been very positive at times. And so I think even for me, trying to figure out what kind of habits I want to have with it. And the hard part is, as a business person, you want people to engage with your media. So you're always trying to find ways to have people click, comment. And so it's like you're wanting people to engage, because then that's the only way that anything you have will get seen, because that's the way Facebook and Instagram have been filtering as far as those social media platforms do it. The more that you engage with them, the more people will see them.
You alluded to some negative things that have come up for you. What does it look like?
I think it's just you can be stuck scrolling for a while, like all of a sudden an hour's passed, like, what did I do for an hour? And so I think for me, even trying to move away from that and thinking like, there are so many other things I can be doing with my time, like reading a book, or just there's a plethora of things I could be doing with my time. But just the fact that it's like, oh, I just lost an hour just looking at nothing that's really, I mean, I may have learned something here or there. Like I follow a Filipino cooking group. So just even like, oh, okay, there's some, like, you know, as far as that goes. But at the same time, you just get kind of lost. Your time all of a sudden gets vacuumed and sucked out. And so I think for me, that is the bigger problem, is that the diversion and the lack of focus. I think that's the one thing I've noticed a lot, is like, it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, picking up your phone, oh, I'm just going to look really quick. And then 20 minutes later, that look really quick for information or whatever has turned into like a long period of time.
Nathan, I know you've had some focus this year on soul care and, you know, kind of spiritual wholeness and maybe even unplugging a little bit from this type of thing. So I'm wondering what your take would be on what a steady diet of social media might have as an effect on our spiritual health
Hmm. Yeah. I think it was about a year and a half ago, I went on my first prayer retreat, which had a lot on the schedule built in to take time for silence and solitude. And the person directing that retreat, asked if we could to, turn off our phones, if we had our computers with us, just to shut it down for the day and a half that we were on this retreat. And that wasn't a super big deal to me. I was like, yeah, I can try this. But what I noticed was I didn't realize how much time I was spending on social media and just on my phone in general until I actually deliberately turned it off and spent some time just completely away from it. And the biggest thing I noticed was things that were important to me were starting to rise up that I had forgotten about. Desires or interests of things that I really wanted to be spending my time thinking about and maybe planning for doing some things in the future, whether it was with my family or maybe it was some kind of creative project or something, or maybe it was even something I really wanted to be seeking the Lord, to be learning more about him, or things from the Bible. It was just like that stuff just started surfacing when I got away from that. And that's when I really realized that the digital stuff that was pulling me away, it's a lot of noise, and a lot of my time being spent on it's just not very meaningful. And so it just crowds the space to where I can actually really hear, my heart and hear my desires. Pastor Josh this past week talked about how God uses our desires. That's a primary way that he uses to change us. And but so the first step for that is actually being in touch with hearing your heart and hearing your desires. If you're not even in touch to hear that stuff, then you don't even know what to bring before God and to have conversations with him. So that's like the primary takeaway for me, is that it's just it can be a lot of added noise, and we really, walking with Jesus and listening to learn to the Holy Spirit, you have to get quiet. You have to get quiet, and it's got to be intentional. And so anyway, and it's not just digital media. I mean, there's so many things that can take our attention away that's really not that meaningful or really doesn't serve that part of us that needs to be quiet to listen to the Spirit.
So I wanted to follow that with asking all of you, there's great spiritual content on Facebook, on Twitter, I don't know about Instagram. Is there great spiritual content on Instagram? But so do we just completely cut the cord here and say for families, we're deleting these apps? Or do you think there's a way to find moderation and not have it become, an all-consuming habit where we're, addicted to the endorphins of getting likes and things like that, versus, there's some really good spiritual content here that grows me a little bit. How have you guys found that balance?
I think probably 5-6 years ago, I was seeking out content in those places for spiritual growth, but so much has overtaken so much advertising and marketing and injected content has overtaken these platforms that finding the space to actually consume the one thing that you're focused on, it's almost impossible to do anymore. So for myself, I'll use it to stay connected to the spiritual community or work community or circles that I'm a part of, but it's not where I'm going to do my growth, So, when I'm spending time in the Word, I usually have the physical Bible out, or I'll use the YouVersion app, but I really don't even do like share the plan that you're reading. I'm like, no, no one needs to know that. That's between me and God, and we'll, so I think that I think there's a healthy way to use social media, but it's a slippery slope, and you have to be able to put those catches in place to keep you from, like you said, Lara, from finding yourself in this endless rabbit hole of stuff that when you're done with it is like, what am I left with? That was like a total waste of time.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is good content out there. I just think that, I think this speaks a little bit too to the way that the church can, should, and maybe shouldn't use social media in outreach and extending the gospel. I'm seeing a lot of one-way conversations that take place. And I don't think that that's the most positive environment to develop growth or discipleship. I think it's helpful, and I think it's a tool, and it's one way that we can communicate, but it doesn't feel genuine a lot of times. It doesn't feel productive even a lot of times, but it can be a good resource, I guess.
When I started using social media, you're pretty excited about it. So you just sort of jump right in and you just give yourself to it completely. You're just exploring, and so you just don't really have any filters or guards up because you're not even sure what to filter or guard. But it is exciting. I mean, I remember being able to get connected with certain preachers or artists or, whatnot that I was excited to follow and to see what content they're going to be putting out. And it was really helpful. But then, I mean, you just start adding more and more. And before you know it, you just have time for any of it. And so I found that I've had to really scale that back, and I've had to, again, be intentional about deciding who, what, and when I'm going to take in this content, because they have been very useful tools. And so it might just be as simple as, I'm picking certain times of the day, and before I get on, I say, okay, I'm going to Instagram. And for me, Instagram's my favorite, but I don't follow any of my friends. I don't post personal stuff. For me, it's more of my work, so doing my design and illustration work, I like to share it on my Instagram, and I follow people who are designers and illustrators for the most part. So it's fun to go in and to actually see their work, see what thoughts they might be putting out. And it's all sort of geared around, the creative process and creative work. And so, I've already narrowed down my use for Instagram. Facebook, I don't even, there's like a few people that I've allowed to come into my feed, and I've tried to just keep it just to friends. I'm more wanting to see updates from friends and what's going on in their life and family versus, articles getting posted or people trying to get a conversation going about some trending subject or something. And so I'm pretty particular about that too. And then I'm not on Twitter, and I haven't used any other social media, at least that I'm not aware of. I'm sure I've got some accounts floating out there. And YouTube's been really helpful. I think about like the Bible Project. Their YouTube channel is great, and I'm going there often. What I really like about that is how accessible the content is. And so I can actually sit down with my son, who's 10 years old, and both of us are getting something out of those videos together. And that's something we get to share with each other, which has been really great. And even following people who do a lot of tutorials, it's been very helpful for my own work. But man, it's a constant week to week trying to figure out how I'm going to get on these things and not get distracted with the stuff that keeps popping up in the sidebar or notifications that keep coming up that are going to draw you away to something else.
It's one of the things I notice is that I use Twitter in the way that you use Instagram. It's kind of my news feed. I don't really follow friends or anything, but I follow news organizations or publications. And I'll notice that as time goes on, I see less and less stuff that I disagree with, or less and less stuff that if I've clicked on a couple of things that follow a particular political point of view or spiritual point of view or something, then suddenly I get a bunch more of that. And I think that's where the Social Dilemma film kind of was going, just to say, you're not getting a full picture of the world, because you get this increasingly small tribe almost of people that think just like you. And then, they used politics as the example. Well, I can't believe the other side doesn't see this. And well, they don't, because they haven't read any of the same things that you have. With your families, Aaron, your kids are a little older, right?
Yeah. Yep. Our oldest is 11, and then we have 8 and 7. And we recently got our 11-year-old a phone, his first smartphone. That's something we've gone back and forth on for quite a while. I mean, to me, as a kid who grew up with a Red Ryder BB gun and there was no internet, like, to have his friends at 7 years old have phones and be talking about, and having well, why does he have a phone and she has a phone and I can't have a phone? And it's like the phone, the actual talking on the phone isn't even a piece of this. It's video games, it's social media, it's all those things, all the apps that they like to use, YouTube, all those things. So we've held off on it for a while, and we're kind of at the point where he was one of the last group of kids in his circle to not have one, which is crazy to me, 11 years old. But we decided, okay, in this instance, he's a pretty mature 11-year-old, for whatever that counts for. So we actually sat down with him and we drafted a contract that he had to sign to have the phone. And even putting this tool in his hand, we've done it with great restriction just because of his age. So, there's no privacy. We own all his passwords. I have filters on the device. I monitor the device. I get notifications for his device. He doesn't have access to it during school hours. He only gets access to it for a total of 2 hours a day. And any of these things can be, altered based on his behavior. So what we're trying to do, and kind of the approach that we've taken, is to take these very small steps and give him just small slices of ownership and responsibility to help him walk through the smaller decisions that hopefully will lay the foundation for the bigger decisions that he'll be making when he's on his own and we're not around. So we might not handle it the same way with the other two. Kind of depends on their maturity and age, but that's the approach we've taken. So he, again, like Lara, no social media accounts. I mean, they're not even supposed to have them based on that age, right? Which I'm still blown away when, kids have them. It's like, okay, well, we're just going to throw the end user agreement out the window. And then we've given him like Messenger from Facebook, which sounds contradictory to that, but there's a specific one for kids. And you actually have full administrative rights over who they can and can't talk to. You have to actually friend their friend for them. They can't do it on their own. You can see all their conversations. So we have regular talks with him about, what he's seeing, what he's posting, who he's talking with, how he's using the device, how is it making him feel, how is it affecting his productivity, is it becoming a distraction, and just helping him develop those triggers so that he knows, okay, I'm actually feeling this way, or I'm acting this way because I've chosen to spend my time this way, or I was too much in this thing, or too invested, or I wasn't considering somebody's feelings in this area. So it's been you know, we're kind of wading through a swamp is what it feels like a little bit. We're just trying to figure out each step as we go, and identify like where he already has some maturity and encourage him in that, and where he needs help and hand holding and development. I mean, our goal is to raise healthy adults, not just, you know, submissive children. I mean, that'd be great, but so we see this as kind of a part of that journey, is walking through these things with them and helping them establish health, because I mean, like Nathan said and Lara said, we're part of the experiment. We didn't have that. We just we were adults when we were given access to this stuff, and we kind of figured out the negative consequences of the use and what it can lead to. So yeah, I think every parent's going to have to deal with it one way or another. And for me, the biggest thing is closing the gap between the kid and their device and your involvement with that, you know, as much as you can. Or at least that's what we've found so far.
Yeah, I'd say for parents who are, say, over, I don't even know what the age would be, but, you know, social media and smartphones have been around for about 12 years, which is unbelievable when you think about that and what's happened in 12 years. But like you said, Aaron, when we didn't grow up with them, we didn't even have them as young adults, many of us, that's really a shift in the whole world to have to adjust to that. Right? Maybe it helps us better understand what an older generation deals with, just with computers or just with the internet, and that it's a little overwhelming to think, well, I have my job and I have my family, but now I got to be an expert on this too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even just adjusting to social interaction. You know, our kids have such a skewed perspective of what that should look like in a healthy way. You know, this is like what we're doing now. This is the format of their classrooms a lot of times right now. So it's a very skewed perspective as to what real community and real conversations and real relationships can and should look like. So it's going to be interesting as they get older, seeing what the results are.
Yeah, and I think you guys have all kind of mentioned it feels like we're swimming against a cultural tidal wave sometimes, and you know, whether we want this in our lives or not, it's here. And so do we resist it? Do we figure it out? Do we, you know, what kind of balance do we strike? And you know, it looks like I'm sure all parents are dealing with this right now, and it's not an easy question. As far as the impact on the church, you know, social media in particular, do you see anything negative or positive that we haven't already talked about that you're saying, that's interesting that social media is having this impact?
I think one of the things is that with technology, it's all about productivity. So it's like continuing this busyness. So it's like, how much can you get done in supposed to be efficient, but it all just creates, you're losing margin for yourself, for your time. And so in that, it's like the idea of success is like how much I can get done. So I think that's problematic. And then it's also very, I would say, individualized, like everything's just, it's become like, you know, even with influencers and it's about me. Like we've come into a social fabric, it's about me and it's not about the people around us and how we affect our neighbor or just kind of that idea, or that's what I kind of see coming up a lot just in our spiritual fabric.
You know, talking about productivity as being a focus, I think too, I've experienced how much can I consume? You know, not just how productive can I be and how can these tools help me, but there's like all this great content out there and I'm just excited to want to, you know, take it in. And I do kind of get to the point where I'm sort of overwhelmed because I'm thinking, how much can I consume in this time that I have, can I read through this stuff quickly? Can I knock out a couple of videos? Oh, my friend posted this thing that's kind of interesting, and I want to engage with that, or I want to comment back. And so I guess it's a little bit of the two, but I think underlying, it's like, how much can I consume, on top of how much can I be productive to accomplish all of this, consuming.
I think that we've all been home so much more in the past 8 months, whatever it is now. That's even more in play, is that we have more downtime. And so I haven't seen statistics, but I would imagine people are more immersed in social media than ever in a lot of cases. And I think you're seeing that even in some radicalized behavior among different groups or something, but it's not a positive.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have downtime, but I think there's more of that escapism, just wanting to escape. And it's like, how long can I like have my mind somewhere else for a while?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things I'm concerned about is, kind of like soundbite theology, where we're limited to, consuming scripture in a post, or consuming even a thought in a post, and there's not much back and forth conversation that can really take place about hashing out a thought. I see a lot of people just like things and repost things and share things, and I get concerned about not only the theology that we're taking, but how is it actually being lived out. And like you guys are saying, there's a lot of consumption, but where's the filter in what we're consuming, and then how do we actually take those thoughts and actually live them out? How are we seeing the fruit of the Spirit being displayed in our actions, not just the people in the feeds that we follow?
Mm-hmm.
As we get to a point where we're going to wind this up, I'm going to ask you guys for one tip each that you think would be beneficial to our church family. It can be anything around social media use or internet use, whatever it might be, or maybe it's family dynamics around phones. And some of you have already, given some good stuff on that, but give me a thought each.
I think for kids, be invasively involved in your kids' social media and digital use, and don't apologize for it. You're there to teach them and to help disciple them, and you can't do it if you don't know what they're doing. So, yeah.
I want to say, if you can, practice a day of rest. So, in our church tradition, we call that Sabbath. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full day, and it doesn't have to be a Saturday or a Sunday. But I think if it's possible for your family to have a number of hours set aside where, you turn everything off and you really just focus on doing something with the family and being with each other. And part of that might just be even sitting down and reading things that you're all interested on your own. You're together, but you're being quiet. And you're just not having that distraction, just to let yourself just slow down together and breathe, rest, relax. My family, we've been taking a full Saturday together to kind of turn everything off. My wife and I, we even have subjects that we won't talk about, like hot button subjects, like say the finances or the family budget, like we just set that aside. For Griffin, it might be, he just doesn't want to talk about school, for the day. And so we just try to rest from all those things that, maybe can work us up or we have to put energy towards. And this, obviously ties into social media and what we use digitally. So it might be movies or TV shows that we just take a break from all that stuff. And like Lara said, opening up that margin so that you have some time to actually talk with each other. And maybe it's even, getting together with your neighbors or some family or friends that you haven't seen in a while, and really dedicating some time because we've got to let ourselves rest. So
Yeah, that's interesting
Definitely.
with that concept of Sabbath. You think of work more often than you would think of being bombarded with messaging from, stuff that you're looking at your leisure. But I think, as I've heard several messages lately that would say it's really hard to hear from God when you're just bombarded with messaging all the time.
mhm.
So yeah, that's great advice. Lara, got one?
I usually just leave my phone in another room so I don't have it by me like all the time.
Yeah.
So that helps. I mean, if anything's immediate, well, all my kids are home, so I know they're okay. So,
As
What
far as
about you, Jim?
Well, I was thinking back to when my kids were growing up, and there's huge value in networking with the parents of the kids they hang out with. So if your kids say, well, so-and-so's already got their phone, and then, well, no, I happen to know they don't. So I think there's strength in numbers with parenting, and especially, if you get a group of like-minded believers praying and thinking through parenting issues, that's really helpful, where you don't feel so alone in all this. And yeah, I find, as an empty nester, I do have downtime in the evenings, and there are times, Laura, you mentioned this too, you can just sit and scroll, and there's that term now, doom scrolling, where you're looking at serious political news or whatever it might be, but you just get trapped in it, and you realize, like you said, 45 minutes just went by and I'm still sitting here.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think just consciously being aware of how you're spending your time, which is no different than it's ever been. There's just more distractions available at an arm's length right now than there ever have been. Well, recommendations for the social dilemma. I think I can without hesitation recommend it. It's not the end all be all answer to all this. And I think there's probably some things it doesn't address, but I found it really useful and just kind of eye-opening with, like the guy who invented the like button is interviewed about kind of regretting that he ever did it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been a good conversation. I hope it's a conversation starter for families in our church, or for even life groups or things like that. So I appreciate all of you guys jumping on today to do this, and go take a walk outside.
Yeah.
in the snow.